Hey guys, I'm back. Thank you for tuning in. I have a cool video planned for today. We're in a bit of a different setup here because it's a bit of a tutorial situation and I wanted to be able to show you guys what I'm doing. So I hope it looks okay. I had brought some orchids to try to set up like a cool display for you guys, but it didn't quite work out the way I wanted it to. It doesn't look as cool as I envisioned in my mind, but it'll serve our purposes today. So thank you so much for joining me. Let me show you what I got going on here. I am very pleased to announce that I got my own Ghost Orchid. This is a Dendrophylax, and I'm so excited to have finally gotten one. I have wanted one for a while now. I've always been so fascinated by them, as I'm sure many of you guys are. They're sort of famous for a number of reasons. There was a whole book and movie, I think, about what happened in Florida, I guess. They were kind of hunted almost to eradication. I think they're protected now and kind of doing better, but they're kind of renowned for a lot of reasons, and I'm happy to have one. I've always really loved anything ingrecoid. This isn't technically an ingrecoid, it's like a relative of them. They think that maybe it had sort of drifted over from Africa originally, but it just made it to United States and South America area somehow. So it's got an interesting kind of history. I don't really know a ton about them. I've started to do some research, obviously, for culture reasons and to make sure I can grow it properly, but there's also a lot of other history to it. It's changed genus, I think, a couple times. The taxonomy is a bit confusing. I don't know a ton about that. Hopefully I'll learn some more and can probably share that with you guys in the future. I'm sure I will do lots of updates as this thing grows and hopefully does well for me. And this one's actually a hybrid. It's Salii cross Lindenii. Lindenii is the popular, well-known one. Salii, though, is very similar. You almost can't tell the flowers apart, so it'll definitely look like a Lindenii. And the fact that it's a hybrid hopefully might make it a little bit easier growing. Obviously, these are challenging plants to grow, especially for a home grower. I don't have a muggy greenhouse, but I'm gonna show you guys what I have planned for getting this mounted. But first, I can't do an ingrecoid video without mentioning my good friend Kelly from High Desert Orchids. She is the one who hooked me up with this little beauty, and she's just awesome. I realized today that I don't think I've ever really explicitly endorsed her on my channel, but obviously she's amazing. I think I just assumed that everyone already knows and loves Kelly, but in case you don't know, High Desert Orchids on Facebook. She's great. She's taught me so much. Pretty much all the ingrecoids I own came from her, and this was another HDO purchase. So thank you, Kelly, if you're watching. She's the best. She does live sales on Thursdays via Facebook. You can look them up there. And she also has a website too. So very awesome. I'm very happy to have this. So what have I done with this so far? So since I got it, I have been periodically soaking it in just like a glass. I've been using bottled water or distilled water with just the tiniest amount of fertilizer. These guys don't like very high TDS water, and they don't like a ton of fertilizer, so you got to be really careful with that. But I figured since it was in transit and now it's going through the process of being mounted, it could probably use a bit of fertilizer or rooting stimulant or whatever. So it's been kind of soaking periodically, but I let it dry out. I don't leave it in there for terribly long. But I did want to give it another final good soak before I mounted it because I want the roots to be kind of flexible so that I can deal with attaching it. But I am going to take it out of that water now. Like I said, I did want it to be sort of damp and flexible when I go to mount it, but I don't want it to be wet because I'm actually going to be using super glue to tie it down. I know that sounds kind of scary. When I first read it, I was like, is that a good idea? But I actually read an article on the AOS website. Maybe I can link it for you guys in the video notes. But he just wrote an article about his experience growing the ghost orchids, and he has pretty good success with them, and he is the one who gave me this idea. Super glue is actually used for similar stuff. It's used in aquariums and aquascaping to glue down corals onto rocks and stuff. So it's actually pretty safe for that sort of thing. Of course, I'm going to try not to use too much of it. I'm going to try to be careful with where and how much I use. And keep in mind, it might not be all super glues that are safe to use. I'm sure some of them aren't, but this is a cyanoacrylate, which is what people recommend for corals and that sort of thing. So that's what we're going to be using. We have my piece of cork. You want to think a little bit about the cork that you're going to use, because you can't really take these off of a mount. You really don't want to mess with them too much after you mount them. So that's why this is like a pretty decent sized piece of cork for a pretty small plant. But what you could do if it was to sort of outgrow the cork, which it's probably not, they'll just kind of keep growing on top of themselves, covering it with roots. It's not really like a regular orchid where it will kind of outgrow a mount. But if that was to happen, you could kind of just like put this on top of another piece of cork or tie another section of cork onto it. So you have options, so it's not a huge deal, but you just want to think about your cork piece and make sure that it's something that it's going to be happy on for a pretty extended period of time. I have here a bag of Spanish moss. I'm using Spanish moss because it is not as like dense as sphagnum moss. It's nice because it's something to kind of put over roots, but it's not gonna suffocate them. It's still quite like airy, but it'll make a little like microclimate because it'll hold just a bit of humidity between the cork. So that will be helpful. And that's what the AOS article recommended also. So I think it's a good idea. So I took this out of the water because I want to let it dry out a little bit. And I'm going to start looking at how I want to orient this on here. I didn't really describe Dendrophylax to you guys very much because I figure that you guys know what it is already, but in case you don't, it's actually a leafless orchid. So it's just roots, and then it will produce an inflorescence with a beautiful big white flower. Big compared to the plant. They're not huge, but they are like this pure white, beautiful. They're one of the reasons it's called a ghost orchid is because it has this kind of like winged appearance, almost like a little like angel or fairy or something. Very cool. I'm sure I'll have inserted a couple pictures into the video for you guys to see. But they're just amazing, and I'd be so happy if it would do well for me and bloom someday, so we're giving it a shot. They're nighttime fragrant like Angrecoids, and they're pollinated by nocturnal moths. I think until recently it was sort of a mystery as to like what pollinated them, but I think there's been some video of moths actually pollinating them, which is really cool because it's hard to capture that sort of thing on camera. I think someone probably put in a lot of work and time trying to catch that footage. So go check it out if you have a chance to look it up. It's pretty cool. Let me get started. It's gonna be hard to like show you guys exactly what I'm doing. I don't have like a mount for the camera to like kind of tilt it down, but I'm just gonna periodically show you footage of what I'm doing. You'll see what's going on. You guys know how to mount orchids. It's not really too much different than a regular mounting, but I thought it'd be cool to show you guys. I'm just excited to show off my Dendrophylax because it is a pretty cool special orchid that not everybody has, so I was pretty excited to tell you guys about it. So I thought this would just be a good opportunity to show it to you guys and talk about it, and we can just chat while I do this mount. So I'm gonna get started. Okay, let me just give you guys a closer look at everything here. Here is the orchid itself. This is actually a pretty decent size. This is kind of what you expect when you get one of these. And I'm very excited because it actually has a couple active green root tips that are actively growing, which is great. Here's my cork piece. There's my Spanish moss. That was just my little glass where I had this guy kind of soaking in there with some fertilizer. Okay, here's a quick look at the orchid itself on the mount. I haven't glued anything down yet. I was just trying to get an idea of how it would actually look on there. And I think I'm pretty happy with that. But down the bottom here are the kind of most active looking root tips. So I wanted to leave a bit of space down there. So I think it's gonna be roughly like this positioning here. Okay, here we are. The orchid is officially glued down, mounted. Now I decided to hold off on the moss. I will tell you why in just a second, but I wanted to show you how that came out. I'm pretty happy with like the positioning of it and everything. Looking pretty good. Okay, are you guys ready to see the finished results? Check it out. I think it came out perfect. Doesn't that look great? I'm pretty stoked. It ended up being the perfect size cork piece. In the beginning, I wasn't sure if I liked like the size and shape of the cork, but I think it ended up looking perfect. And I was actually chatting with Kelly from High Desert Orchids while I was doing this, and she was like, why don't you use live Spanish moss? And I was like, oh yeah, why don't I? Of course I knew it was like available and I know it works great, but I had some of this dead Spanish moss because I've used it for other things. I have it draped over some of my bare root plants like vandas and stuff, and it kind of serves the same purpose as the live kind. It seems to still, you know, hold in a little bit of moisture and humidity and stuff, but for something like this, I figured it might be good to get the live stuff. So I didn't tie down or glue down this moss because I know I'm going to be removing it once the new moss comes. I did order some, should be here in about like a week or so, and then I'll just pull that moss off and add the live kind, and I think it'll look a lot better. In the meantime, I think this is fine. I think it looks pretty cool, and it's probably going to stay in that spot on my shelf. It's not directly under the light fixture, it's off to the side a bit so it won't, you know, get cooked, but they do like a good bit of light. They don't have the leaves to photosynthesize, so they get that all from their roots, so it's good to give them a good amount of light. I think that was something I read somewhere too, that people tend not to keep them bright enough because they do grow pretty low on the trees in the wild. But of course they have the sun that is much stronger, so even in those kind of shadier spots, the light is a lot brighter. So when we're translating that into our grow space at home, these fixtures of course are not as powerful as the sun, so we might have to keep them a bit closer to the light source than you would think based on looking at them in the wild. So probably going to keep it in this position, and I'll play around with it and see how it does. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this somewhat. I know it might have been kind of boring. There's hundreds of orchid mounting videos out there, so it might not be the most exciting video ever, but ghost orchids are pretty cool and they're not super common in a lot of people's collections, so I thought it was worth sharing this with you guys. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any tips for me or questions or anything, please share. I love chatting with you guys in the comments, and I will definitely keep you posted and let you know how this does for me. I'll show it to you in my next video. Hopefully by then it'll have the nice live Spanish moss on it, which will look really cool. So I look forward to sharing that with you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't. I would love it if you would stick around and become part of the family here. So thank you so much. I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.